Welcome back to Mythic Sky Storytime. I'm Dr. Laura Todd, spiritually oriented psychological astrologer. This is the third show in my new series, Cosmic Costumes. In this episode, I'll be talking about the social butterfly sign of Gemini. Gemini is the third sign in the zodiac. And here in the Northern Hemisphere, it takes place in late spring. The word Gemini itself is Latin for twin, and thus the sign itself has a lot to do with twins, twinning, and duality. The glyph that we use in astrology to represent Gemini is the Roman numeral for 2. And Gemini, as a sign, is associated with the planet Mercury. And as I've talked about in previous episodes, every sign of the zodiac has an element and a mode that we associate with it. Gemini is the first of the air signs. Air signs in general are associated with communication, with ideas, with connection. They can come off sometimes as cold, though, because it's so intellectual. And there is a fluidity to the air signs that can have them come off as non-committal and flighty. But some of that movement also allows the air signs to see multiple sides of a situation or an argument. We then, with Gemini, pair it with the mutable qualities. The mutable signs are those signs that fall towards the end of seasons, where, as I discussed in earlier episodes, cardinal signs launch seasons and fixed signs are in the middle of seasons. The mutable signs, Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, and Pisces, fall at the end of seasons. Here in the Northern Hemisphere, Gemini falls at the end of spring. And those mutable signs, like the word itself illustrates or suggests, there's a malleability to the mutable signs. Things are in transition. Spring is transitioning into summer during the time of Gemini. The mutable signs then are linked with that transitional energy, that shifting energy. So there's an adaptability quality to all the mutable signs. There's a flexibility to the mutable signs. That changing of the seasons, the changing of the guard. Sometimes, though, that can result in a lack of focus because things are mid-transition. So it doesn't have the laser focus that we see in the preceding sign of Taurus in that fixed energy. That mutability also can create some ambivalence, right? That not wanting to commit either way, not quite sure what or where we stand or think, particularly when we pair it with the air energy of Gemini. That mutability then can also lead to unrealistic expectations because things are changing and we can have a vulnerability in these mutable signs to think that more is possible than maybe is in the time-bound reality of human life. There can be an erratic quality to it too, in this quick change energy of the mutability that sometimes it can come off as chaotic or confused or restless. There's an inconsistency in that change. Nothing is constant and therefore it's always in flux. And when we pair that with the air element of Gemini, we get this lack of focus or this inconsistency in communication or in ideas, people changing their minds quickly, which on one hand can be good, but it can also lead to a lack of commitment or a lack of conviction for one's principles, potentially. because one's always looking at the other side when we pair this with the air energy of Gemini. Now, as I discussed in previous episodes, every sign has a key phrase and phrases associated with it. And the one constant that we always tie with Gemini is I think, because it very much governs the mind. In being an air sign, it is linked to communication, and that is part of why we associate Gemini with the key phrase I think. It's also very tied to this idea of data gathering. In Virgo, which we'll talk about in later episodes, we get the analysis of the data, but the Gemini energy is the gathering of the data. There's a duality to Gemini in how it thinks, in how it communicates. That's part of that twin energy, the symbolism of Gemini being two, being the twin, being the Roman numeral. And so it's ever changing of ideas. Gemini is also associated with the planet Mercury, who was the messenger of the gods. So that's part of that thinking, part of that communicating energy that we associate with Gemini. As a sign in astrology, it's also a sign that's associated with our neighbors in our community, our close nearby community, with relatives, particularly siblings, and aunts and uncles can sometimes fall into this realm of Gemini. There can definitely be a scattered quality to Gemini, as it's always fleeting back and forth, easily distracted. I sometimes describe Gemini as someone walking down a road, engaged in conversation, and then they see something shiny on the corner and mid-sentence change what they're talking about. That's that easily distracted energy that can exist in the sign of Gemini. It's very much linked in being tied to the planet or the god Mercury, about speaking, communicating, thinking, and the trickster. For Mercury is very much part of the trickster archetype in mythology. There can be, in this flighty, always staying on the surface energy that can exist with Gemini. It's the air quality that is staying sort of surface level, superficial, not going deep into the analysis, right? As I was saying, it's this data gathering versus the analysis. So it can come off sometimes as superficial energy of not wanting to go deep, but staying surface level. And as I've talked about in previous episodes, every sign is associated with a part or parts of the body. And one of the things that Gemini governs is our nervous system and how we engage with the world, how our nervous system responds to the stimuli that we encounter or events in our lives, and that fight, flight, or freeze response to the world is linked with this archetype. So as I was saying, as a sign, it's the sign that's associated with Mercury. Mercury is one of the planets associated with two signs, so it is associated, linked with both Gemini and Virgo. But for our purposes today, I'll just be focusing on the Gemini aspects of Mercury. And each day of the week is associated with the planet. As discussed in previous episodes, that Mars is associated with Wednesday and Venus is associated with Friday. With Mercury, we see the etymological roots of the word Wednesday and it being tied to the word Mercury or the god of Mercury. This is particularly true or easy to make the linguistic through line when we look at it from Spanish, as the word for Wednesday in Espanol is miércoles, Mercury's day. So this is a day that we associate with the planet Mercury. And some of the other key things that we associate with Mercury that we can then find this through line to the sign of Gemini is communication, thinking, writing, the messenger. There's a magician, magic quality, that sleight of hand energy that is very in alignment with Mercury or Hermes in the Greek pantheon in the mythology. There's a storyteller quality to Mercury as well. And that can be conveying stories, and that can be weaving fantastical stories or coming up with narratives to explain away actions or justify them. Sometimes we associate Mercury with Peter Pan, that eternal youth energy. And mythologically, Mercury was also associated or considered a psychopomp, who is the courier of souls. Mercury, or Hermes, was one of the only gods who was allowed to freely travel between the underworld and the upper world, between the underworld and Olympus. Other gods were either forbidden from such movement or needed to do so only with the permission of those considered more powerful than they. But Mercury had the freedom to travel between the worlds, and that's part of that mercurial energy, that transitional energy that I talked about in this idea of the mutable signs, is that ability to, that in between, that ability to travel between, that changing, shifting energy we see in the psychopomp quality of Mercury. And so if we look at this sign also from a psychological perspective and the social psycho development, in astrology, we sometimes associate different signs, different parts of the zodiac with different ages of human development, of child development. And here in the sign of Gemini is where we see sort of preteen, older, big kids, and preteen, the sort of 6 to 12-year-olds. So in earlier signs in Aries, we really see infants and pre-verbal, and just as they're beginning to walk is sort of where Aries lives. And then as they are communicating more and moving into toddlerhood and little kid, we are in the realm of Taurus. And then we get the big kid to preteen psychology when we move into the realm of Gemini. We see this sort of big kid, preteen psychosocial development in the realm of Gemini. And part of how we can see this through line is how much during those years a child's language accelerates, and it accelerates fairly quickly. They go from sort of baby talk or toddler languaging and communication with limited vocabulary to much broader vocabulary, much more able to express original thought and idea and not just parroting what they're hearing around them. We also, at this time, children begin to learn to read and write, all of this being this mental stimulation, this big leaps in intellectual growth and communication that's happening during those years. It's also because Gemini is considered part of the social butterfly. This is an age when children start to make friends, and often friends that are independent of children connected with friends of their parents. When kids are small, a lot of who they spend time with tend to be the children of people in their parents' social network, not as much them making friends independent of the adults in their lives. We also at this time start to see children becoming clearer for themselves about what they like and dislike for themselves, as opposed to, again, sort of mirroring or parroting those around them. There is a individuation that is happening during this period that they may vacillate back and forth with during some of this. That's part of that Gemini of what do I like, what do I not like, what have I liked or done simply because that's what those around me are doing, as opposed to finding something that I like or enjoy that is uniquely mine. And that ping-ponging back and forth between those things is something that we see sometimes during this time of psychosocial development. And in this flighty energy, this air mutability in the sign of Gemini, we can also see children during this time, or another way that this energy can show up is struggling to stay on task, easily distracted. This starts to show up during this time of development, and the laser focus that a child may have had when they were younger starts to fall away, and they are more impacted and stimulated by the world around them. As I've shared in previous episodes, one of the things that is really helpful when it comes to understanding a given astrological sign is looking at some of the mythology that can be associated with the sign, or that sometimes is very directly associated with the sign, is either symbolically representative of it or deeply present in the mythology of the evolution of the sign within the Greco-Roman culture that Western astrology was birthed from. In looking at the sign of Gemini, there's many stories that I could discuss. As I said before, Gemini or Mercury is very much a Peter Pan archetype. But for our purposes here, I think it makes the most sense to discuss the story of Castor and Pollux, as they are the twins. They are the constellation of Gemini. And as with many Greek myths, there's lots of versions of their stories. In ancient Greece, most of these stories were not written down. Most of these myths were passed down orally, and therefore over the centuries that they were told and retold, and in different parts of antiquity, they would evolve and change and be tweaked depending on where they were being told and who was telling the story. When it comes to looking at the story of Castor and Pollux, I'll turn today toward one of the more common versions of their story that is told. The story of Castor and Pollux begins in Sparta, a powerful part of southern Greece during antiquity. And according to myth, Leda and her husband Tyndareus were the rulers of Sparta at this time. And as is common with many Greek myths, Leda's beauty caught the eye of the philanderer Zeus, king of the gods, who was known for lusting after and seducing mortal women. And so he went about formulating a plan to seduce the queen. On the evening in question, the king and queen made love. However, later that evening, Zeus, appearing as a swan, seduced the queen, and they too slept together. The evening events resulted in 2 sets of twins born on the same day. There were 2 girls, Helen and Clemestra, and 2 boys, Castor and Pollux. 2 of the children, Clemestra and Castor, were mortal and the offspring of the king. The other 2, Helen and Pollux, were demigods, the children of Zeus. Despite their different fathering, the 2 boys were known collectively as the Dioscuri, or the sons of Zeus. And the 2 boys were inseparable. They did everything together, and often depicted what we think of as twins today, having their own secret coded language between them. Together, the 2 boys went on many adventures and were regularly getting into trouble and very mischievous. They tricked those around them in the process of their adventures and found fun in doing so. Continually on the move, they never settled in one place for very long and were always going off on the next adventure. Among their many escapades, they met 2 young daughters in a neighboring kingdom and did their best to court them. However, another set of brothers, also interested in the young girls, decided to fight Castor and Pollux for the young women's hand. The ensuing battle resulted in the death of Castor. As he was the mortal of the 2 sons, Castor, upon his death, was brought to the underworld, the realm governed by Hades, Zeus's brother. Grief-stricken by the death of his brother, Pollux felt he would rather die than spend one more day without his twin brother beside him. However, as a demigod, he was immortal, and thus would never be in the underworld to be reunited with Castor. Desperate to reconnect with his brother, Pollux pleads with his father Zeus to reunite them. Taking pity on his son, Zeus agrees to broker a deal where the boys will spend half the time on Olympus and half the time in the underworld. However, for this to occur, Pollux must give up his divine god half and bestow upon Castor the ability to be on Mount Olympus, the realm of the gods. Agreeing to his father's terms, the brothers are reunited and are known today as the constellation Gemini. And as the myth tells us, this constellation, the boys, are only visible in the upper world for half the year, as the rising sun obscures the boys from view for roughly 6 months out of the year. In looking at this myth, there's many aspects of the sign of Gemini that we can see. Quite directly, Castor and Pollux become the constellation Gemini, for which the sign is named. But also, their playfulness and their tendency to get into trouble and be mischievous is very akin to this air sign and social butterfly. Likewise, their chattiness and constant flights of fashion, their desire to go on adventures and short trips, are both things that we often associate with Gemini. The duality of the twinning is clear in its connection to this sign and the need for constant change. To help you understand this sign for yourself, as I've done in other episodes, I will now lead you into a guided meditation. Before we begin, make sure you find somewhere comfortable to sit. And I do recommend sitting rather than lying down when it comes to meditation. Having the spine straight facilitates the meditation process. We'll begin with 4 belly breaths. Breathing in this way helps to calm the nervous system, one of the things that is deeply tied to Gemini, and bring you into your body and help keep you present throughout the meditation. To do belly breaths, you will want to inhale through your nose for the count of 4, hold at the top for 2, and exhale completely through the mouth. Like a deflated balloon for the count of 4, pause again at the bottom, and then we will begin again. To support you in this process, I will be doing the counting. From there, we will move into a meditation and guided imagery. And so, sitting either with legs crossed or in a chair, with your eyes closed, you want to take a deep breath in through your nose. 1, 2, 3, 4. Pause and release completely. 1, 2, 3, 4. And pause. And inhaling through the nose. 1, 2, 3, 4. Pause. Exhaling through the mouth. 1, 2, 3, 4. Pause. Inhaling through your nose. 1, 2, 3, 4. Pause. Exhaling through the mouth. 1, 2, 3, 4. Pause. And one last time, inhaling through your nose. 1, 2, 3, 4. Pause. Exhaling through the mouth completely. 1, 2, 3, 4. And now bringing your breath back to a normal, natural rhythm. You still want to be breathing deeply, but at a pace that you find comfortable. And to help set yourself up for the guided imagery we will be moving into, we're first going to connect with the chakras to help create a protective energetic bubble as you do some exploration in to this mercurial sign. And so on your next inhale, you want to bring your attention to the base chakra, root chakra. It is the center that helps ground you to the earth. Found at the base of the spine, it is what roots you to Pachamama, Mother Earth, keeps you in your body and present and grounded. And on your next inhale, you want to bring your attention to sacral chakra, second chakra, found just below the belly button. This is the center of receptivity, of give and take, of action and pause. There's a lot of power in making those choices. It is found tied to the reproductive organs of the body, and so it is about creation. What do you give birth to in this world? What do you create? And on your next inhale, you want to bring your attention to the solar plexus chakra. This is the center found just above the belly button, below the rib cage. Quite literally, it would translate to sun center. It is our center of power, our center of radiance. And strength. And on your next inhale, bring your attention to heart chakra, found at your heart. It is the center of the body. It is the chakra between the lower 3 and the upper 3 centers. Heart chakra is how we love and how we accept the love of others. Our ability to connect with universal love, unconditional love, and be willing to receive it to ourselves as well. It is where we access compassion and empathy for ourselves and those around us. And on your next inhale, bring your attention to throat chakra. In the center of the throat, this is the chakra that governs how we communicate. The words that we use, our willingness to speak and willingness to listen. And our struggles in doing so. And on your next inhale, bring your attention to the third eye. This is a center of vision, of clear perspective, to be able to read a situation honestly without the complexity of reaction. The center of vision. And on your next inhale, bring your attention to crown chakra, just at the top of the head. This is the chakra that connects you with the divine, with God, Goddess, universe, spirit, whatever your language is for source. This is your center that tethers you to the divine. And connecting with that divine light, you want to now bring that divinity, bring that oneness back through the central channel of the chakra system. The golden light of the crown filtering down through each center. It comes through you, out through the third eye, helping to provide clarity where your vision may be obscured. Continuing down the channel as you breathe deeply in and out. Gold light coming through the throat chakra, healing any wounds around speaking your truth. And as the light continues to come down, bring it through the heart chakra, healing heartaches and heartbreaks. Times where you did not receive the love you deserve because of other people's own wounding, and times where they have yet themselves to heal. And now, your next inhale, bringing that golden light from the heart into the solar plexus, healing any issues around power that you may struggle with, where you struggle to step into your power, or where you have had misguided ideas of what power looks like. Being empowered as opposed to power over those around you. And on your next inhale, bring your attention into sacral chakra, second chakra. Healing wounds or challenges around creative expression, your ability to be receptive and directive, where you maybe pause when you should act, or where you have been vulnerable to rushing out of fear of not making a goal or a deadline. And on your next inhale, bringing that golden light through the channel into base chakra, helping you to ground, tethering earth and sky together. You are now surrounded in a bubble of golden protective light as we move into our guided meditation. In your mind's eye, see yourself on a sailboat, making its way to an island not far from the mainland. Standing on the ship's bow, the sails blow as the wind dances all around you. And as the wind blows, you contemplate about your life and areas that you find challenging. It's midday as you dock with wind-whipped hair, and there, standing on the pier, are two trusted friends. As you disembark, they greet you with a warm, playful smile. They have met you today to answer some of the questions you have pondered on your journey across the sea. Standing on the pier, you share with them where you've struggled to communicate clearly with a friend, or partner, or sibling, and ask these allies for their insight of how you could improve your relationship. How could your communication with these dear ones become better? And if there's more than one person that you want clarity about, feel free to take your time here, getting clarity regarding as many people as feel right for you in this moment. And always ask clarifying questions when they arise. If you've been having trouble with a writing project or speaking event, what do they think could be helpful to you at this time? What would help you to stay on track? If you found yourself scattered in your life, what do they suggest would help you to be less so? Or conversely, perhaps you felt stuck and need their assistance to be more flexible. See what advice they have for you today. What suggestions do they have for you to care for your nervous system in whatever way you find yourself responding to moments of stress? How did they suggest you bring yourself back to balance, back to rest, and non-reaction? And let any other questions come up organically Again, always ask for clarification when you feel it's needed. And as your conversation comes to a close, you notice your sailboat has arrived and is preparing to depart on its journey back to the mainland. Before you board the ship, ask these friends how you can reconnect with them when needed. If you find your nervous system taxed, what you can do to reconnect with them, or perhaps other times where you're needing clarification about how best to communicate with friends. How can you stay in touch with these dear ones on this island off the coast of the mainland? And thanking them for their insight. Before you go, see how they would like you to honor them for their insight and support today. What reciprocity, what exchange would be appropriate today? Now boarding the sailboat, taking your place at the bow of the ship, it pushes off into the wind as it gently blows you home. And whenever you feel ready, you can slowly begin to move your fingers and toes and find yourself back in your room and open your eyes. When you feel ready, I recommend you grab a journal to jot down any insights that have come to you on this journey. This has been Dr. Laura Tad with Mythic Sky Storytime. Please like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And to learn more about my work, you can visit mythicsky.com.